All right, hello and welcome into KBO Chats Live. I'm Sam Pasco alongside Erik Halterman, and we are breaking down everything you need to know for the KBO action tonight/tomorrow morning. Before we begin, do want to shout out the site rotowire.com/free KBO. There it is right below me. Check that out. That is where we are going over everything. Great information there. Also follow us on Twitter at RotowireKBO to stay updated on the latest. So diving right in, Erik, we start with the standings. Top three teams are starting to shape up a little bit more. Games back is starting to separate a little bit. In the last week, there was pretty bunched up. And now we got the Twins, Wiz, and Lions as the top three. An unusual bunch there. I know you love average margin, and in terms of that, if we sort by it, we have the Deuce and Bears in first in terms of average margin. In terms of the hottest team, though, that belongs to the LG Twins. They're 8-2 with a 5-game winning streak. They are on a tear right now. Twins are winning. What do you make of the standings right now? End of June right now with the Twins as the first place team.
Yeah, I think it's not at all out of the question to call the Twins the favorite at this point, not by a wide margin by any means, especially since they're 8th in scoring still, but they are starting to score a few more runs lately. They've scored 38 over their last 5. The main thing, though, is the pitching staff. They're 0.69 runs allowed per game, better than anybody else. Compare that to the Dinos, who have the league's best offense, and they're only scoring 0.16 runs per game, more than the second best team. Granted, the Twins are helped by pitching in the league's most pitcher-friendly park, and maybe their offense would rank a little bit higher if not for that as well. But again, when you're nearly 3/4 of a run per game better than everybody else in terms of runs allowed, you can afford a slumping offense, which I think is the best way to describe it. I think there's still plenty of talent on this Twins team. If Roberto Ramos ever gets healthy and becomes 90%, 95% of what he was last year, that'll help that lineup tick up a bit. They've got some other guys, Hyunjung Lee, Yun-Sung Che have been hot lately. They have enough talent there that I think they should end up middle of the pack in runs scored, and I would believe it if they stick around as the best pitching staff all year. So I don't think they're lapping the league by any means, only a 1.5 game lead on everybody else. But I think this is a team that I would be surprised if they didn't finish in one of the top few spots at the end of the year.
Yeah, and that offense has kind of been their biggest question mark, and they have been trending in the right direction recently, scoring 14 last night against the Landers. We will get into that game in a bit, but beginning in the game, first up is the Hanwha Eagles and the Samsung Lions. Moving now into our game breakdowns. We have some pitchers on the slate with some ugly ERAs, and this game is no exception as we have Kim facing off against Choi, starting with Ki-Jong Kim of the Eagles. Just 13 innings pitched on the year. He's 0-2. Young guy, though. I know Wander Franco to make a lot of headlines in Major League Baseball, being born in 2001. Kim was born in 2002, even younger. Probably not ready for it, though, as evidenced by that ERA. He showed potential in his first start. Any chance he does well against the Lions here tonight?
Yeah, I'd be surprised. I mean, there's probably something more to come from him. He's just 18 years old. He was the 2nd overall pick in the most recent draft. So that's clearly the Eagles think he has some potential. Just hasn't really shown any of it. Only 3 starts, but a 6.75 ERA, 188 whip, striking out just 12.7% of opposing batters. He was not good in the Futures League either. If he was dominating there, maybe I would think that he could put things together at the KBO level soon. But he was arguably even worse. A 5.70 ERA, but a 2.24 whip. I think opposing batters hit 350 something off him, and that's at the Futures League level. 19 strikeouts against just 16 walks. So when a guy is struggling that badly in the KBO's minors, and then suddenly you throw him not only in the KBO, but in the KBO's most hitter-friendly park, I think we're going to see a lot of runs on the Lions. They were one of my top stack recommendations on tonight's cheat sheet, and I would definitely be happy to have as many Lions in my lineup tonight as possible.
All right, going against Kim and going for the Lions here. Speaking of the Lions and their starter, they have Chae-Hwang Choi going for them tonight. An ERA under 5 in the last 2 years, 3.5 last year, pretty decent, but an ERA over 6.5 this year. Good strikeout to walk ratio over his last 3 starts, but he has allowed 7 or more hits in 5 of his 7 starts on the year. I'm not really sure if this is a guy we can back, even with that great Lions offense.
Yeah, I think he's sort of emblematic of this whole slate. There's only one former MLB starter, only one foreign pitcher on this slate, but a lot of the local Korean arms have at least something to like about them, and Choi definitely fits that category. Last year, he was really quite good, a 3.58 ERA. I think that was first or second among qualified Korean starters. It was him and Sungwon Moon, the now injured Landers starter, were the two best, at least among guys who met the qualification threshold. Obviously, Chung Mo-koo was great at the start of the year, but didn't finish as a qualified starter. So Choi has the potential to really be quite good. But he missed the start of this season with an abdominal injury, and I think it's fair to wonder if he was still somewhat hurt when he came back. Those first 5 starts, he had a 7.82 ERA and a whip just shy of 2. His last 2 starts haven't been great, 5 runs allowed in 11 innings, but especially when you consider that those came against the Dinos and Bears, it represents, I think, a pretty huge step forward from what he was doing early in the season. So still some very unconvincing season-long numbers, but when you throw in that he was quite good last year, that he's been slightly better recently, and the fact that he gets to face the Eagles, I think he's an interesting arm that's worth considering for daily fantasy, despite some again, very poor season numbers.
Very interesting pick here with Choi of the Lions. Talking now about the offenses of these teams. Hanwha is ranked 9th in runs per game. Samsung, middle of the pack, 5th in runs per game. Hanwha has lost 4 of their last 5, while Samsung has actually scored 7 or more runs in each of their last 3 games. I would imagine you'd be leaning towards that Samsung Lions offense there with Jose Perella batting near the top.
Yeah, for daily fantasy purposes, if you aren't selecting Choi yourself, you could certainly select some Eagles, given that this game is at the league's most hitter-friendly park. But I'm definitely interested, like I mentioned earlier, in as many Lions in my lineup as I can get. I guess you could lean towards the righties, like I suggested in my cheat sheet today. Jose Perella has hit 12 of his 16 homers at home this season. The 16 homers is 1 shy of the league lead. Really likes that hitter-friendly park down in Daegu. Another guy I recommended, Won-Sok Lee, their number 6 hitter, third baseman, has just a 668 OPS on the road this year, but an 864 OPS at home. So I think a lot of guys become a whole lot more interesting at that home park. And when you get a matchup against a guy like Ki-Jung Kim, I think be very interested in a whole bunch of Lions.
All right, liking that there, liking the Lions batters. And now moving over to the pick, the Hanwha Eagles against the Samsung Lions. Total here set at a lofty 11.5 with the Lions as heavy favorites. Where are we going to go, Erik?
Yeah, definitely agree with the Lions being heavy favorites. Better lineup. They have a pitcher who has been good before, even if he's, again, somewhat shaky this season. At least he's shown something, whereas Ki-Jung Kim has not. That over-under is quite high, but you do have, again, the league's most hitter-friendly park, one decent enough lineup in the Lions, and a very shaky pitcher for the Eagles. I think the Lions might have to do most of the work here, although Jae-Hung Choi has had his share of bad outings. So I think when you factor that in too, where there's a chance that Choi is just bad again and this turns out to be a 7-5 game or something like that, I think I'm going to go with the over. I will note also in this game there's some risk of rain. I think it shows up with that rain icon, but I believe the number was pretty low last I checked, like 25% or so. So you may have to avoid it for DFS purposes if you can't check the weather at 5 a.m. or whatever it is your time. But I think it has a decent chance of going through.
A 25% chance of rain for Daegu Samsung Lions Park. And we're going with the over 11.5 and the Samsung Lions on the pick for this one. Moving right along, we got the Kiwoom Heroes and the Doosan Bears matchup. Doosan won game 1, 10-3. Actually, starting with their starting pitcher here, you can see some pretty numbers there. Impressive record, and that's Won Jun Choi there, 7-0, 3 earned runs in total over his last 25 innings pitched. Not a big strikeout guy, only crossed that 5 strikeout threshold in one start this year. But I'd have to think you would agree that he's probably a top 3 starter on this entire slate tonight, even facing Kiwoom.
Yeah, he actually just missed out as from being one of my 3 recommendations on the cheat sheet, but that's mostly because I had recommended 2 other fairly expensive starters. So I threw Chae-Hung Cha, who we just talked about, as a cheaper option. But I definitely like Wonjun Cha as well. He was a guy who started off last year as a reliever and really wasn't all that remarkable, but then he had to move into the rotation based on injuries and underperformance. I think he was the fill-in for Chris Flexen when I think it was a broken foot. But he really deserved to stick around the rest of the year, and he did stick around the rest of the year with a 3.29 ERA and 18 starts. This year he's been even better, 2.34 ERA on the year with a 1.11 WHIP. Doesn't strike out a ton of guys like you mentioned. His 16.5% strikeout rate is actually an exact match for what he did last year. But he has quite good control, 5.6% walk rate this season, 6.2% last year. So you can afford a slightly below average strikeout rate. You can afford slightly more balls in play when you're not issuing too many free passes. That lack of whiffs keeps him from being a top-tier pitcher, but we're now, I think, 18 starts last year and 11, 12 this year. So we're at a full season's worth of starts of him being really quite good. So I think there's every reason to have confidence in him tonight and going forward.
Yeah, you can see there were just 9 strikeouts though over his last 3 starts, but again, just 3 total earned runs. So maybe you take that there because he is a pretty good pitcher. Moving over to the other side of this game, the other Choi, Won-Tae Choi for the Kiwoom Heroes. He has 3 or more earned runs in 3 of his last 4 starts. In short, that just means he's been allowing a lot of runs recently. He's capable of a good start at times, but those seem to be kind of random. Like he'll either have a 7 strikeout to 0 walk game or a 3 strikeout to 3 walk game. I'm not sure which one we're going to see here tonight, especially when he's facing the Deuce and Bears offense, which is quite powerful.
Yeah, inconsistent, I think, is definitely what he's been this year. He will face a tough assignment here, although he'll at least get to do so at the most pitcher-friendly park in the league, Gem-Till Baseball Stadium. Choi 2 years ago had a 3.37 ERA. It looks like he was going to settle in as one of the better starters in the league before falling to 5.07 last year. This year it's much better at 3.68, although his whip is actually getting worse. Might be some batted ball luck in either direction between those 2 years. He doesn't strike out a ton of guys, 15.3% on the season, which is worse than his opponent here by a little bit. But he also doesn't issue a ton of walks, 7.8%. KBO's walk rate is a little bit higher than MLB's, so while that would be only slightly better than league average at the major league level, it's a little bit better than that in Korea. So kind of a similar archetype to Wonjun Choi, but just not quite as good as I think how I describe it, and not quite as consistent, especially recently.
That's what we're looking at with the other Choi in this matchup. For the offenses here, Doosan is ranked 3rd in runs per game. Kiwoom in the middle of the pack there at 6th per runs per game. Doosan has 4 wins in their last 6 games. Kiwoom has 2 wins in their last 3 games. Should mention the Bears offense has been heating up recently as they are averaging over 6.5 runs per game over their 6-game 4-2 stretch. So they're doing pretty well. What do you make of the offenses here in this matchup?
Yeah, there's a decent amount of talented hitters on both sides. Happy to use many of their guys most nights. Be a little bit happier to select some Bears tonight because I think Won-Tae Choi is slightly worse than Wonjun Choi, maybe a little bit more than slightly, although it's not a huge gap between the 2 guys again. Would like the lefties from both lineups. Obviously, Jung-Hoo Lee, Jose Fernandez, 2 of the league's best contact hitters, 2 of the lowest strikeout rates, highest batting averages in the league, 1 on either side. We'll note that there's a couple guys who I noticed showing up there that I need to make sure are taken out of our expected lineups. That's Kunwoo Park for the Bears was demoted before yesterday's game. Seemed like it was sort of due to fatigue and maybe disciplinary. It seems somewhat vague. I'm not really sure what the discipline would be for. So they'll be without him for, again, not really sure, given that it's fatigue / maybe punishment for some mysterious something. May not be a long absence there, but that does remove one of the better bats from the Bears. David Freitas on the other side has also been sent down after really just accomplishing nothing. It was a very weird foreign hitter signing for the Heroes. They have not had any luck in that position since we started covering the league last year. Nothing from Taylor Motter, nothing from Addison Russell, nothing from David Freitas. Not really sure why you would sign a light-hitting catcher and then not have him catch. I mean, I think if you're going to have a guy as a DH, you'd sign some, first baseman who couldn't field or something like that, who could hit at a decent amount. Although I guess you end up with somebody like Ryan Healy for the Eagles, who hasn't shown a ton, but I'm not really sure, in what world Freitas ever was going to work out. So a bit of a weird one there. Not terribly surprised to see that not working out. It seems like this is the time at which we might see some teams start to look for new foreign hitters, especially a team like the Heroes, who are still in the race but a little bit out of the playoffs right now. They could definitely use a boost down the stretch from, a legitimate, talented foreign slugger.
Yeah, some players to be aware of in the lineups here that are not going to be in the actual lineups here. Moving into the pick here for the Kiwoom Heroes and the Doosan Bears matchup here. Lowest total on the slate at 8.5, with the Bears as the favorite. Where are we going to go with the pick?
I definitely agree with the Bears being favored. They've got a slightly better lineup and a better pitcher, although, again, one Tae-Choi for the Heroes, not bad. It's a tough over-under. Two pretty good to solidly good pitchers, but also two pretty good lineups, and also a very pitcher-friendly park. I could really see this one going either way, and I think that's reflected on the odds here. I'm going to go under. I think that park is swaying me just enough. There's enough talented bats here that, a 5-4 score really isn't a particularly high-scoring game that I think could definitely hit the over. But you get me two pitchers who are good most of the time in the league's most pitcher-friendly park. That's a slight under for me. More confident on the Bears than I am on the under for sure.
All right, going with the Doosan Bears and the under in this matchup here, under 8.5. All right, moving right along into the third matchup on the slate. We got the NC Dinos against the Lotte Giants. NC won game 1, 5-2. We mentioned this before at the top of the show. Dinos first in runs per game. They are sixth, though, and sixth best in run prevention. But hopefully that should be helped by Drew Rzinski tonight. Their ace of last year, doing all right this year, especially over his last 4 starts. We're talking Jacob deGrom level numbers from him. A 0. It's good when the ERA starts with a 0. 0.64 ERA in his last 28 innings pitched. A whip under 1 in that span. But has been trending in the wrong direction for strikeouts. As you can see here in his game log, started at 10 in that stretch and has been going down each start. Not a good sign there for Rzinski. And his walk numbers were high in his last start. Thinking Rzinski can repeat his dominant form we saw back on May 29th here against Lotte, or maybe do we see more the KT Wiz version where he does walk 3 or more guys?
Yeah, I will note he's not quite Jacob deGrom because I don't believe he's driven in any runs this season. But from a pitching perspective, at his respective level, you're absolutely right. Recently, he's been that good. 0.64 ERA, as you mentioned, 0.79 whip over his last 4 starts. This is a guy who had an identical 3.05 ERA in his first 2 seasons in Korea. Very solid, if not quite the top tier. But he's cut that down to 251 this season. Most of his starts he's kind of got an odd game log in that 10 of his 13 starts, he's allowed 1 or fewer runs. And in the other 3, he's allowed 6 or more. And not all of those are earned, but when you get to him, it seems like you get to him big. I don't think the Giants are going to get to him, though. As you mentioned, it was his best start of the year against them last time. 10 strikeouts, just 3 hits in 8 innings. And it's a pretty righty-heavy Giants lineup as well, which gives a boost to a right-hander like Rzinski. His strikeout rate, even though he didn't strike out a ton the last time, it has jumped up pretty notably in each of his seasons so far in Korea. He was in just just above 20% last year, and it's up at 23.6% this season, which is close to major league average, but well above the KBO average. So that gives him pretty high ceiling for fantasy purposes, and the fact that he just doesn't really seem to give up runs lately gives him a very high floor as well.
Yeah, been looking great recently, liking him now against the Lotte Giants. On the other side of this matchup here, we got No going for Lotte, who's been not good this year. 3 more earned runs in every appearance on the year. 3 strikeouts against 9 walks in his last 15 and 2/3 innings pitched. You can see there, ugly ERA, and I'm pretty sure that's reflective of the type of pitcher he is now at this point in his career. Any upside with No here, or is this just you want to avoid him because he's facing Rosinski and that Dinos lineup?
Yeah, I think this could well be the best pitcher on the slate against the worst. I think it's either No or Kijun Kim. No, maybe a decade ago would have been one of the better pitchers on the slate, but this is a 37-year-old, hasn't shown much for a few years. 2 years ago, he was out of the league entirely, pitching in Australia. Came back home last season, had a 4.87 ERA, which is passable as a back-end starter. Just nowhere close to that this year. 7.57 ERA, whip of almost 2, strikeout rate of just 12.8%. He's only getting worse as the season's gone on. 9 earned runs in 5.2 innings over his last 2 starts. Over his last 4, he has 3 strikeouts against 9 walks. There's just not much left in the tank here for No. Would be scared of him or scared to use him for fantasy purposes, even against the weakest lineups in the league, let alone the best. So just not a lot of reason to believe he can slow down the Dinos at all. I kind of doubt he's going to be in the rotation for all that much longer, given his age. There's no real reason that Giants need to plan on him being around when they're next going to be good. And that might be a bit because they're nowhere near the playoffs right now. So I think I wouldn't be surprised if they give his spot to somebody younger in the near future.
Yes, that's going to be a No on No there, a hard pass, as he is facing off against the number 1 team in terms of runs per game in the NC Dinos. Lotte, in terms of their offense, they're not too shabby themselves. They're 4th in runs per game. Kind of unusual with the Giants. When they win, and over their last 5 games, when they win, they've scored 7, 8, or 9 runs. But when they lose, they've only scored 1 or 2 runs. Feeling like this might be a loss, so you might want to avoid some of those batters because they could then only score a couple, especially off Rosinski. And that Dinos offense, 6 runs per game over their last 5. So maybe there's some opportunity to get some stacking here. What are we looking at with these lineups, Erik?
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend starting a single Giant tonight. Although I do have to mention Asiap San for not necessarily tonight, but against righties who aren't Drew Rosinski. He's back up to hitting 298. He was hitting in the 260s until not that long ago. But then over his last 14 games, he's hitting 421. He's always been an elite contact hitter, hitting 295 or above for, I think, 11 straight years. So good to see him finding that again. Wouldn't really look his way against Rosinski, though, and I would look the way of more or less any Dino in the lineup. Yuji Young, especially, has been on another level entirely. He's the league leader in OPS. This is a 34-year-old catcher, and he's just not slowing down. He's only getting better. 1125 OPS on the season. And he's also the league leader in homers now, too. I think last year we saw him as a very good power hitter, but more of an all-around kind of guy. This year he's doing everything. 17 homers on the season because he's hit 6 in his last 8 games. So he's the best hitter in the league and the hottest hitter in the league. And he's a catcher. I think for daily fantasy purposes, it's almost no case to not include him in your lineup just because he's that much better than every catcher in the league, let alone that much better than every other hitter at any position, really.
Yeah, some impressive stuff there from Yuji Young, batting in the middle of that Dinos lineup. Moving into the pick now for the NC Dinos Lotte Giants game, total set at 10.5, with the Dinos as the big favorites there with that pitching disparity there. Where are we going with the pick?
Yeah, very, very clear Dinos, as those odds suggest. It's one of those tough over-unders because basically all the runs are going to come from one side, right? I mean, how many do you think that Giants are going to get this game. Maybe one off Raczynski.
Two maximum, maybe.
I mean, he doesn't give up anywhere between 2 and 5. He either gives up 1 or he gives up 6, and it doesn't feel like a 6. So you give the Giants 1, like you said, maybe 2 in his 7 innings, maybe another run or 2, which means the Dinos are going to have to get 8, 9. But, with Kenya, the pitching the way he's been pitching, I kind of don't hate the over anyway. That we're talking about the league's best lineup against a guy who's struck out 3 and walked 9 over his last 4 starts. So I could see an argument for going either side. Maybe you think that, 10 runs for the Dinos is too much for them, too much to rely on for any one team. But I think no is bad enough, and the Dinos lineup is good enough that I lean slightly over. But that, I've been talking about a couple of these over-unders as tough today, and I think this one might actually be the toughest.
Yeah, look at the NC Dinos and the over, slightly over 10.5. As you can see here on our NC Dinos game log here, you can see they did score 9 runs back on the 17th against KT. To check out this site and all of the lineups we're looking at here, go to rotowire.com/free KBO. Moving on into the next game we got is the LG Twins against the Ssg Landers. The Twins put up 14 runs and 1 in game 1. They got Min Ho Lee going for them today. An ERA on the decline after being lit up in his first start, in his opening start of the year. He was a reliever, though, last time. A little concerning. Maybe they don't trust him entirely to go deep into games, as he has only had 1 start since May 22nd that has gone past 5 innings pitched. Not sure how much depth we're going to see out of Lee tonight. You like him tonight with that ERA a tick under 5?
Yeah, this is, I think, a really interesting matchup. 2 second-year pitchers, both of whom were regional round picks in last year's draft. The regional round, talked about it in the past, it's a round that is before the rest of the draft, and in which teams can select 1 player from their local area. So you can think of it as the true first round, the 0th round, whatever you want. However you describe it, these guys are some of the top picks in last year's draft. Lee did a little bit more to establish himself last season. Had a 3.69 ERA, but it wasn't entirely backed up by a 141 whip, a strikeout rate under 15%. But, just being a regular member of the rotation at age 18 last year indicates pretty big things about his future, I would say, even if he didn't, deserve quite the numbers that he recorded. This year, it's just kind of weird the way his stat line's moving. The ERA is up well over a run to 4.80. The whip is down to 1.29. The walks are up to 11.1, but the strikeouts are up too to 21.6%. So he suddenly learned to strike people out and isn't allowing as many base runners, but is allowing more runs. Definitely a case where I think some batted ball luck in both seasons is affecting his numbers. There's enough here to think that he's at least pretty good. He does have a fastball that averages, I think, just a hair over 90 miles per hour, which isn't elite velocity, but for the KBO, that's pretty good, especially for a guy who's still just 19 years old. So definitely not the complete package, but he has quite a few very strong starts, and I think he has the potential to be quite good on any given night, even if he's not yet reliable.
All right, some interesting and hopefully a great future for Min Ho Lee going forward. He's facing off against as you mentioned, the regional round guy. 2.81 ERA in June for 16-inning pitch with a whip just a tick over 1, and he has had 5 or more innings pitched in each of those June starts. You give him the edge here against Min Ho Lee because of the recent success, or what are you feeling with on this Landers team?
Yeah, it's a tough one because he hasn't given up as many runs in his last 4 starts, but he does just have 10 strikeouts against 8 walks. So not necessarily the most convincing. On the season as a whole, ERA of 4.34 is pretty good for a 20-year-old second-year guy, even if it's nothing special. But a whip of 1.48 says that ERA could come up some. Strikeout rate of 18.6% is about league average, but a walk rate of 12.3% is a bit high. Maybe there's a little less in his resume so far than Min-Ho Lee. Also, he didn't pitch nearly as many innings as Lee did last year. So he's had a few good outings, but like Lee, I think he's still young, still hasn't put it all together. Can put up big numbers on a given night, but most of the time is more mediocre.
Mm-hmm. Mediocre from O. Now, looking at the lineups, the LG Twins, they are the number one team in the league, but they are just 8th in runs per game. The big reason they've been winning is because of that run prevention. They are first in run prevention, and they were actually swept by these same Landers back in May, and they are now 17-6 since. So they've done very well since being swept. SSG, they are 7th in runs per game and 7th in run prevention, and they've been averaging less than 4 runs per game over their last 4. For that reason, I have to think you'd have to lean towards the Twins, but offensively, anything of note that might change that?
Yeah, slight lean Twins, but there's plenty of talented guys in both lineups. I think for the Twins tonight, I'd be looking at the righties against Wonseok O. Hyunjung Lee had 2 homers last night. He also had 2 homers, I think it was 4 games ago. So 4 homers and 12 runs batted in his last 4 games. That's not bad. A low 234 average on the season, but his BABIP is just 241. He's still walking a lot and showing a bunch of power. So once that batting average on balls in play starts creeping up, I think he'll be a very strong all-around hitter. That's why he's still batting high in the order despite that low batting average. He homered 17 times in just 81 games last year while battling injuries too. So I think there's a lot to like. And because that batting average is so low, he's still quite cheap on DraftKings, just 3,300. So I like him a lot tonight. I like Yoon-Sung Chae as well. He had one of the Twins' 7 homers last night. I think it was Hyun-Soo Kim and Hyunjung Lee each had 2. So I like both those righties. I also had Jamie Romak for the Landers on my cheat sheet tonight. His price has crept down. He's not having his best year, just hitting 242, but he still has plenty of power. 15 homers on the season, just 2 shy of the league lead. He's got 150 homers since he joined the league in 2017, which is the second most, second behind only his teammate Jung Chae. So he's, a proven slugger, proven veteran slugger, homering twice in his last 3 games too. So I think both pitchers have enough about them that if you like them for daily fantasy purposes, I don't hate using them. And if you don't trust them, I'm certainly open to using guys against them too. It's a kind of a very middle of the road game in that way.
Yeah, you mentioned Romak's home run numbers. I know he was on the Diamondbacks before he went to the KBO. They could use that type of power with the way they've been playing recently. They got that 1 win. But anyway, moving into the pick here for the LG Twins SSG Landers game. Another high total here set at 10.5 with 2 pretty evenly matched teams. Where are you going to go?
Yeah, I think I like both pitchers enough that I'm going to take the under. Although, again, they're both young. They both have blow-up potential. I think the odds there correctly reflect that this is another pretty well set over-under. I think the odds also reflect that this is quite close to a push. I really think you can go either way. I will side slightly with the Twins in Min-Ho Lee. I think there's just a little bit more to his resume. The Landers have had a better lineup on the season. The Twins rank 8th in scoring. The Landers are, just 1 spot above them in 7th, actually. So not a big gap there. When you throw in that the Twins play in the league's most pitcher-friendly park, I think it's right to say the Twins have a slightly better lineup, although they both run about 5 or 6 guys deep, full of perfectly competent hitters. So very close to a push on this one, but I will go Twins.
All right, going Twins in the under 10.5 game in the Twins-Landers matchup. Moving into the final game on the slate, the Kia Tigers and the KT Wiz, 2 teams at the opposite end of the spectrums in terms of the standing. We got Kia. They're down bad. They lost last night, game 1, 6-3. They now have 5 losses in a row, and they're sending Im to the mound tonight. ERA over 5 last year. It's near 5 this year, but when we look a little deeper, he has a 3.38 ERA in June. And it's kind of weird. If you back that time schedule back out to the beginning of May, he also has an ERA of 3.38. Exactly the same when you switch it over to the May starts. So maybe is that more the true form of him? Now he's settling down in the season, a more of a 3-8 guy, a 3-3 guy, 3-8 guy, rather than the one that's closer to 5?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. He seems to have some streakiness to him. Last year, he started off the year quite well. Looked like the Tigers had the best rotation in the league. They had a pair of good foreign starters in Aaron Brooks and Daniel Mengden, and then they had Yuji Young, who's now a Texas Ranger, and Im, who was looking quite good at the beginning of the year. So it looked like they ran 4 deep of guys you'd be very happy with any given night. And then Im fell off a cliff as the season went on, and the Tigers missed the playoffs. Obviously not just on Im, but they no longer had that strength, that's for sure. This year, he started off terribly, 8.14 ERA over his first 5 starts, and a 2.68 ERA over his last 6, with that whip dropping from 164 to 108. Last year, he had actually really good strikeout and walk numbers, despite finishing with an ERA north of 5, 19% strikeout rate against a 5.9% walk rate. He's kept the walk rate more or less identical this year, but the strikeout rates dropped all the way down to 14.9%. So now he's a low strikeout, low walk guy, which I guess might explain some of the variance, just more balls in play than usual. He's had runs like this in the past. At the start of last year, he was quite good. But for most of his recent seasons, he has a fairly high ERA. So I think he could blow up at any time. But if you want to take a chance on him for daily fantasy purposes, given that he's pitching well now and has pitched well in the past, I think it's a risk, but not especially a risk against the Wiz. But I don't think it's a crazy risk to take.
All right, some interesting thoughts there on the Tigers starter. Moving over to the other side of this matchup. Pretty nice pitcher here, going for the Wiz with a 3.41 ERA on the year. That drops way down under 2 to an ERA when you just consider the ERA in the June starts. Best thing, though, 18 strikeouts to 4 walks in that span. Are you a fan of Young Pai Ko tonight?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Young Pai Ko. Strikeout to walk dominance is something that I talk about all the time, and he's got it this year. Strikeout rate of 21.3% against a walk rate of just 4%, especially that control, I think, is particularly impressive in a league where the walk rate is a bit higher. And this is actually what he's done all along. He didn't pitch the last 2 years due to Korea's mandatory military service. But in his 2 years as a starter before that, he had an almost identical 21% strikeout rate and a 3.3% walk rate. That ERA was actually north of 5, but right around league average, given that that was still the KBO's juice ball era. So I think it's no surprise at all to see his ERA down at 3.41 this year, given that apparently he didn't miss a beat at all in those 2 years off. It has the more or less exact same strikeout and walk numbers. He's been incredibly consistent this year. 6 or more innings, I believe, in every single start. And 10 of those 11 starts have been quality starts. So you know what you're getting from him basically every time he goes out. You especially know what you're getting out from him against the Tigers, who are the worst lineup in the league by a wide margin, and just demoted Preston Tucker, deservedly so. I would say he's hitting 245 with just 4 homers. So I think I'm pretty happy with Ko every single time he goes out there, and I'm especially happy with him today.
Yeah, you got to be. The Kia Tigers offense has been a mess right now, 10th in runs per game. Just 11 total runs over their last 7 games. Keep that in mind. They got shut out twice in that span. 11 runs in 7 games. That's not a good number. That's not where they should be at. The pitching doesn't get much better in general, 9th in run prevention. KT is on the other end of that. They are 2nd in runs scored per game on the year. They scored 6 yesterday. In terms of the offense here, Preston Tucker is listed in the lineup here. I don't believe he should be, as you mentioned. He has been dropped from the active roster.
Yeah, would not touch any Tigers tonight. I mean, really wouldn't touch any of them pretty much every night. There's just nothing there. And when, even I would have taken a chance on Tucker every now and then. I wouldn't have tonight. When he's gone too, it's getting ugly over there. There's no surprise that they're at the bottom of the run scored leaderboard, at the bottom of the standings as well. Really just already more or less a completely lost season for the Tigers. On the Wiz side, it's not the best matchup if you buy into him being better lately, but Baek Ho-gong is so good you can start him every single night. And Jae-Gyun Hwang has been doing quite well in the last few games. He missed over a month after a bad hop in the infield, had a ball hit him in the nose. He had to have surgery for a broken nose, but he's back and hitting well. So those two guys, I think, make for a great pairing, even against him, who's been better lately.
All right, moving over to the pick now. The total for the Kia Tigers KT Wiz matchup is set at 10 runs, with the Wiz as the heavy favorites. Of course, with that abysmal Tigers lineup. Where are we going with the pick?
Yeah, the Wiz are correctly the heavy favorites here, nearly as heavy as the Dinos were. I think those are pretty clearly going to be my number 1 and 2 pick when we get to that soon. In terms of the over-under, I'm going to go under with this one. I think the Tigers just might not even score. I don't think they're going to get more than 2. And I think Gi Young Im has been good enough lately that I'm not going to project the Wiz to get 8, 9, 10 runs themselves. So that's under for me.
Going with the under in the KT Wiz in this one. All right, that is all 5 games, all 10 picks there, as you can see here on the DraftKings Sportsbook page. Moving now into our final segment on the show today, the top 3 picks. Erik, from both totals and any team, you hinted at there for the top 2 picks. Go ahead. What are the top 3 picks on this slate?
Yeah, it's going to be Dinos number 1 over the Giants. Massive gap in starters. I think you could say I think it's definitely the best starter. As much as I like Drew Wachinski has been even better, and especially lately has been dominant. Kyung No just has nothing left in the tank. League's best lineup against him too. Very easy one. And then, as we just talked about, maybe a slightly smaller gap in the pitchers, given that Gi Young Im has shown something lately. But Young Pyo-ko is very good, and the Wiz lineup's very good, and the Tigers lineup is even more bad than the Wiz lineup is good. So that's pretty easy number 2 for me. For number 3, it's either the under here or the Lions over the Eagles, and I'm going to go, I think, with the Lions over the Eagles. Remember, there might be some rain here. Chae-Young Choi has been shaky this season, but he has talent like he showed last year. He's shown a little bit more of his last 2 starts, and now he gets to face the Eagles, whereas Ki-Jung Kim was very bad even at the Futures League level, so there's no reason to believe he can do much of anything at the KBO level at this point in his career. So three pretty big gaps in pitchers, making for three pretty clear favorites.
Targeting those pitching matchups there, we got the NC Dinos as a top pick, followed by the KT Wiz and the Samsung Lions. That is all we got in store for you today. Thank you guys for tuning in. Be sure to check out the site, rotowire.com/free KBO, to explore all the daily lineups. We will get those updated with the players that are not in there, including Preston Tucker, as well as all the daily lineup stat information as well. Follow us on Twitter at RotowireKBO. Thank you guys for tuning in.
Yeah, thanks for coming, everybody.